You're listening to Permission to Shine, the podcast. Stories of overcoming obstacles and finding self-empowerment with Sherisse Bisram, Inner Power Activation Leader.
Hey everyone, welcome back 2025, and I have my first incredible guest. I mean, she is she wouldn't call herself this, but I call her a goddess, and she is the goddess of property for sure. And I feel like you might be like, property, how's that got to do with everything? But her story is incredible. She is a powerhouse of a woman and really rooted in everything that she does. So I'm really excited to present to you the goddess in brackets, Athena.
Hey Sherisse, how are you doing this morning? I love your energy. Your energy just gives everything life. It really does, and I adore it. So I'm really looking forward to today's conversation.
Yeah, no, well, thank you for joining me. And I think that, why I wanted to have you here is because, your story hasn't been a straight line. And I think that a lot of us are taught that property is like a really good investment and or that is the pinnacle of success as a person. And I feel like your story kind of touches on these points, but sort of ebbs and flows in your own direction, and especially from a feminine perspective, right? Because my podcast predominantly is female listeners, so I feel like it's really nice for us to kind of hear just you as a woman, like how you went through this journey and everything in between, really, to be honest. So if you'd like to tell us, kind of the listeners, what it is you do and your full title and all the things.
Yeah, definitely. So what's really interesting is what I've just gained from what you just said is how others perceive you, which is really interesting because when I think of myself, I don't think of Athena and property. I don't see that. I maybe see like Athena and travel, Athena and musical theatre, Athena and, sunshine. And that's how I see me. I don't see me as Athena and property. So first of all, I take away this point that the perception of how others see you is really, really interesting. So basically, a bit about me is that I was one of these people, and again, this is a really interesting one in terms of the psychological factor, and I don't know if other listeners will relate to this, where when I used to grow up, I used to really try and be the best that I could at everything that I did. And that stemmed from really early childhood, like that element of being really competitive. Like Sharice, would you consider yourself a competitive person?
I would say that I felt like I had to prove myself my whole
Yeah,
life.
right. Here we go. So I was an extremely competitive person because I constantly felt like I had to prove myself. And what's really interesting is that when you start to get older and delve deep into yourself, you start to understand why. So, like most people, and I really haven't met anyone who really didn't go through this themselves, I was bullied quite severely at school, for example, because I had frizzy hair and weird teeth and my name was Athena and I grew up in London, originally from Cyprus, but then moved to London when I was about 6 years old because my parents divorced and my mum, didn't have anything because she was a stay-at-home mum and had to come to the UK to have that support. And so it's really interesting how those sort of moments shape you into who you are. So I became this really competitive person, always proving myself. And that really took me through. And I think when I reflect on it, it's this notion of like why do we feel we need to prove themselves? So there's the element of bullying where I tell you the story, haven't I, Sharice, about having to pay 5p to sit on the cool kids table, which I did ridiculously. But also this element where because my dad left when I was quite young, maybe it was psychologically this element of well, did he leave because of us? Do I therefore need to be better because he left? So do I need
Mm.
to prove myself now? And there's a lot of that, in your head going around. Also, because my mum relied on my dad when we were living in Cyprus, I therefore thought to myself, I don't ever want to have that happen to me. So I therefore became this, if you like, masculine energy that then thought, right, I've got to step up. I've got to be the person that's got to protect her, to take her forward, to take her through all these things. And so therefore I thought when I left university, I had to get the most high paying, high flying job, which was in Liverpool Street as a marketing executive for a forensic accounting firm. Now, let's just
Wow.
pause on that. How boring does that sound?
It sounds very professional, though. I was like, wow, that's a big
Yeah,
title.
That was my very first ever job. Straight out of uni, I worked for a forensic accounting firm as their marketing executive. Now, if you actually just think about that, first of all, that's incredibly male dominated.
Yeah.
I think there were about 3 forensic accounting firms that delved into all of the nitty gritty of accounting, as it were. And I remember saying at a young age, I was about 21, 21, 22. I remember saying, we need to get more females in this industry. Let me put on female events. Even back then, I was saying that.
Mm.
Then I did that job for a year, realized I absolutely hated the hustle culture. I hated the sales life. I hated all of that. And so I made a decision with my partner, and the choice was, because we had a bit of money saved up because it was this high flying job in London, do we either buy a house now or do we go traveling around the world? Me being me, I was like, mate, we are traveling around the world. So we did. We went around the world for a year, like literally changed my life. If anyone hasn't traveled a lot, key takeaway I would take from this podcast is go, see
Mm.
the world, get different perspectives, visit different cultures, understand it. Like, for example, just giving you an idea of this, of why travel was so important to me, was when I was in Liverpool Street and we were going out and clubbing and, spending ridiculous amounts of money at these nightclubs, Mahiki and all of those, champagne treasure chest and all that absolute bullshit, quite frankly. What actually then happened was I went to Cambodia and we did a homestay, and there were 5 of them living in this one hut, as it were. And I remember them chasing around all the chickens and just playing football, and they all looked so happy. And I was like, oh, like, is this what happiness actually looks like? You don't have to
Mm.
have that much. And I feel like travel played such an important part of that in my
Yeah.
life and my story. So then what happened was I decided to come back and get a job in the travel industry, which I did for 7 years. So I was a premium travel consultant, a sales team leader, and it worked beautifully for my character because, one, I love to travel, so I got to like travel the world. I've been to 6 out of 7 continents. The only one I haven't done is Antarctica, like, which I'd love to do. But it was also sales, so we were constantly compared to our peers. I was constantly at the top of the leaderboard. I was constantly taken out with the directors and the CEOs for dinners. I was taken to we were taken on a trip to Hong Kong. We were going to go to Brazil, but then COVID hit, and I had this really fast-paced life again that I thought I'd left behind and then found again for 7 years. And then what actually happened was COVID hit, literally March 2020, COVID hit. And I was like, oh my God, like, what do I now do? Travel is my life. It was obviously a commission-based job. The basic salary was rubbish. And I remember thinking, oh my God, like, I've got one stream of income. What am I going to do? And so I lost my job. Then, felt sorry for myself for about 2 weeks. Ate a lot of Ben and Jerry's ice cream, watched a lot of Disney, as we all did, I'm sure. And then I was like doom scrolling through Facebook one day, as we all do, and I came across like this property education company, and I was like, okay, £99 for 2 days. I'll do that. And my partner was literally like, what are you doing? You don't know anything about property. You're a travel girl. Like, and I was like, do you know what? Like, it's better than watching Sleeping Beauty like 1,000 more times. Let's do something different. So I did, and me being me, literally learned for 2 days and thought, right, I can do that. So I had my savings that I had saved up based on my sales job, and I went and I set up a limited company the next day, which I'd never done before. And I went and bought myself a flat. That's all I could afford with my deposit, which, by the way, if you're investing in property, it's 25% deposit. Whereas if you're living in the property, it's only 10%. So I needed 25%, saved it up, and I went and bought a flat in Bournemouth, which is where I live. And the idea was to convert from a 1 bed to a 3 bed. So I learned all about planning. I learned all about how to purchase a property, never done it in my life. And then from that, I then went and refinanced and pulled some money out and then went again. And so that was the beginning, if you like, of beginning to learn how you can make money through property. But actually, what then happened, the interesting part of my story, I feel, is that I started to network, as we all do, and I started to meet other people. And what I began to notice was at a lot of these networking events that I went to, they were extremely male heavy and dominated. And so I felt I was back in this Liverpool Street environment again. And I can tell you the first networking event I went to, there was 45 people in total because I counted everyone. And only 3 of them, including myself, were women out of 45 people. Like, can you imagine that? And of course, the conversations were different. There was a lot of, guys in groups and drinking and rah and rowdiness. And I remember this poor girl, I'll never forget her to this day. This was about, I was about 4 years ago now. Her name was Claire. And I literally attached myself to her like a koala because she was the only other person in the room. And I was like, please don't leave me. And she probably thought I was crazy. It made me realize, where are all the women? So I therefore went searching for these women in property groups, and I was like, right, where are they? And I couldn't find any. There are more today, but at the time there weren't any. And I remember sitting down with my friend Sophie one day. It was my birthday actually, and she said to me, "Why don't we start a podcast for women in property to tell our story?" And I laughed in her face, like literally. I was like, "Who's going to listen to that? Nobody cares about us. This is male dominated. Like, we've got no chance." And she's like, "I'm telling you, I think this could be great." And so, therefore, on my birthday, on the 19th of September, I think it was oh my God, when would this have been? This would have been like 3 years ago, like three and a bit years ago. I think it was 2022. Girls in Property was born that day. And so we began the podcast. It was actually 3 of us. It was me, Sophie, and our friend Julia. And we just got together. We got together, we chatted about life, and suddenly this podcast started to just roll and transform, and it became something we didn't realize that it did. And then we decided to put on an event for women in the property industry, and we hosted an event, the 3 of us, for 50 women, which was amazing. Like, 50 women came along, we had speakers, we had a day. And do you know what really stood out to me was the conversation in the room when you opened it to the floor was so different because it was
Mm.
just women as opposed to having men in the room. We were able to talk about what it was like to be a mum, what it was like to have your menstrual cycle, what it was like to, have all of these ideologies and things about what you should be as a woman. And I just feel like those conversations couldn't have happened if men had been in the room, or women wouldn't have felt comfortable to open up like that.
Yeah.
And so for me, Girls in Property is like, I've done quite a lot of cool stuff in my life. Girls in Property is one of the things I am most proud of because of that. And, there came a time when, let's face it, when there are 3 strong women in business together, it there comes a point where something's got to give almost, because it's difficult to carry it on. Everyone's got very different schedules. Everyone's got very different ideas about what they can do. Everyone's got very different ideas about how much money they think should be invested for a business to take off. And so we all had a conversation, and Sophie and Julia decided that they no longer wanted to go forward with Girls in Property. And I knew in my heart that Girls in Property was everything that was needed and required in the industry. And to lose it would have been awful, I believe. And so I therefore took it forward. I officially incorporated the business. So Girls in Property exists. I trademarked it. And now I've got my podcast. I've got my community of over 80 women. And I've got my events, next one being in April, for about 80 odd women. So that is kind of where my journey and where I am now, and kind of how I got to where I am. So sorry if that was long.
Yeah. No, I loved it. It was really nice to hear like the little details as well, because I feel like I've heard obviously your story before, because me and Athena met in LA. I know we think that's really cool. When we say it out loud, we're like, yeah, that's cool. And I obviously I've heard you speak and all the lovely things, but it's just really nice. And I think what's amazing about this space and holding podcasts, which you all know too, is that there's always an alignment with yourself and the other person. And so much of what you were sharing in your own personal story is, so similar to mine, in the sense of, you were taught at a young age that that masculine role was not available to you, so you became it, exactly the same as me. And I feel
Mm.
like that's where the proving energy comes from, that doing energy comes from, and that fast pacedness is because we are trying to fill a void that was, left for us. And I said it on your podcast that there's a thing about, when we're younger, we're only leading with our emotional part of our brain, so we believe that everything's our fault or our responsibility. So therefore, we're now ingrained as adults to keep pushing and achieving and striving, because we think that that's going to give us our worth and, you know, our value, and again, fill that gap. So that was one thing. And then going into the travel part as well, I've said on this podcast a number of times, travel, see the world, see different cultures. And you literally said it there. And I loved your example of being in the home in Cambodia. Mine was, I was in Thailand and we were completely lost, backpacks on our back, and there was these little kids playing with a cardboard box, and I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
There's nothing to worry about here. We were hot, we were sweaty. It was me and my best friend, and we were just like, we sat down at the corner of the road, we got a drink, and we just sat next to the kids playing, and it was bliss, you know. And it's just really puts
Yeah.
life into perspective, doesn't it? Especially when, even when you've had hard things happen in your own life, I think seeing the world and getting a different perspective on it, just it, you know, I say this saying about zooming out. I think we hone in so closely on our own problems that, you know, when you see the world, when you go to a different place, even in the UK, for example, you just see the different ways people live. It just requires you to zoom out a little bit and use skills that you might not have used before, or, you know, that peripheral vision. You know, if you're looking at only forward, you don't get to see the side view, and then you take in everything else around you. And I think that's so beautiful and powerful. And I love how, you know, that's such a part of you, and that for me feels so feminine from you as well. Like that feels like so wholesome, which is so beautiful. Because again, you know, like when we think about business and moving forward, there is almost this masculine energy that comes from that. But I think that, yeah, that just filled in all of the gaps, I think, in your story, which is so lovely. And yeah, just how you're driven by purpose, I think, is so lovely. And you know, the reason why you're here, really, to be honest. I wouldn't have anyone on here that's just like, yeah, I just wanted to make a load of money. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
No, yeah, and it's one of those things, isn't it? And just going on what you just said, Sharice, because I love that, is two things. One is this idea about going back to perspective again. So, for example, you know, you might introduce me, as people do naturally, is they say, Athena, property. And I say this on stage all the time. If you were to cut me down the middle and open me up inside, for example, property is not what's spewing out of me. Like, quite frankly, and I've said this openly, right? I actually find property quite boring now. Like, been there, done that. Thanks very much. Yeah, okay, bricks and mortar. Thank you. But what I do love is what property has given me.
yeah,
And what property has given me is my love of travel, my love of musical theatre. Like, I don't know if you know this actually, Charisse, but I did performing arts until I was 18. And so I used to dance, sing, act until I was 18. I loved it. It gave me an element of expression, which is probably why I'm so comfortable on stage, because I just love what you can give to others through that. And so
mm,
I always say to people, if you want to sit down with me and have a conversation, you don't, if you want to learn about property, I'll talk to you about it all day long. But at the same time, don't feel you need to come and talk to me about that. Let's talk about travel. Let's talk about the cardboard box. Let's talk about the time I got food poisoning in Bangkok and had to travel across Bangkok to try and find plain pasta to take my antibiotics. Like, these are the interesting stories that I really love, and get to know people better. You know, we're in a people business and we love to learn about the
mm,
psychology of people, and that's what I really love. And yeah, I just think that travel, perspective, and as you said, the other thing I wanted to say was, when you travel, you realize that your problems or your life is actually very small when you
yeah,
think and you open your eyes to what is happening in the world, you know? And we might think that what's happening to us is this huge thing, but in the comparison of the world, it's actually quite small, and that can sometimes help you think pragmatically about where you're at and what your problem is. So, yeah, travel, people, absolutely.
yeah. No, and I love that. And I think that you're absolutely right. And I think it's almost like when people used to say to me about being a dancer, you know, like I've used that example there. And I think, you know what it is? I think it's a blessing and a curse, isn't it? It's that double-edged sword. It's like, you know what? You've created success through your business that involves property. So therefore, it's easy to say that
Mm,
Athena property, because obviously that's how you've made money. But you know, that is your vehicle, as you were saying, for you to be able to now do the lovely things that you enjoy in your life. And I think for me, as I was sifting out of my dance career, people were still talking to me about dance. And I was like, yeah, and you know, like there's like all of this, like, you know, deep rooted trauma healing, like spirituality things to me. And we're talking about dancing. And I'm like, you know, I believe they all tie in hand, like you said,
yeah,
the skills that you gain from when you performed. And I think I had that conversation with you briefly in LA. I was like, you must have done acting or something. And I think you did say to me then, because I think the way that you project for me is clear that you've had that some sort of training or enjoyment in that space. And yeah, I think it's just the integration again of our identity, right? Because I think I used to be annoyed about that. And now I'm like, do you know what? Maybe that's just all of me, right? And I think
Yeah.
it's this the rising sign is how people see you as well. So I think it'd be interesting for us to see what your rising is, because I think that'd be something, I reckon it's an earth sign, because obviously you come across so well and so put together and so analytical in a sense. You can put your ducks in a row, and I think that's how people perceive you. And then when they get to know you, you're fun and you're like full of all this like crazy energy, which is lovely. And like, you're Disney mad, which I love, because
Yeah,
before
love
I
Disney.
actually before I got changed, I did have Little Mermaid pajamas on, and I do always have a Little Mermaid cup, so we'll
I'm
reckon
here for it, girl. I
that's
am
it.
Disney all the way. And also, we should be like, me, I'm always very open and honest whenever I speak. And we should talk about the fact that you did such a powerful, when we were in LA, you did a really powerful movement. And also, you got us to close our eyes. And I think it was, you'll explain this better than me, but you got us to kind of like visualize, and we had to take ourselves back to being a child. And I remember you took that through. And, I'm happy to say here, because I think it's important to be open and honest, is this potentially well put together person, i.e., me, I broke down. I completely broke down in front of everyone because, when I think about the little me, if you like, they're like, I just want to give her a hug because she went through quite a lot of things. Do you know what I mean? I want to keep the
Mm,
podcast upbeat, but, and you're like, oh man, like, that was tough. That was really
yeah.
tough. And I just want to like scoop her up and go, you know what, girl, like it is going to be okay. But when you're that age and you're getting bullied or things are happening to your life and your mum might say to you, oh, they're just jealous of you and all these things, you're like, no, they're not. Like, and sometimes I just want to say to women out there, whether you're in business or you're just a woman out there, like be kind to yourself, be kind to yourself and just love yourself. Because I always believe that if you don't love yourself, like you can't rely on anyone else to love you. Do you know what I mean? You've got to stand there and give yourself affirmations and be proud to give yourself those affirmations. Like I don't know, Sherisse, I don't know if you've ever had this. I feel like particularly in business as women, we always feel like, oh, we better not say that. And oh, we better not feel like we look really beautiful today and say we think we look beautiful today or say we think that we're really smart. And I used to go through that quite a bit. Whereas now I'm like, hell no, like I'm really proud of myself today. Dan, I look hot today. Like, say that to yourself because if you're waiting for someone else to say it for you, like you'll be waiting till God knows when. Like, say it for
Absolutely.
you.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I can't say I've been that person as an adult, but only
What, been like
because
shy and reserved?
yeah, no, I'm not. But you know why I think that? I think because my trauma and hard stuff of like being that odd, weird brown girl carried me through my 20s. So then when I got to 23, I had this perception. I was so warped about what I looked like. Like I had
Yeah.
body dysmorphia. I felt like I looked like a dragon. Like I literally was like so saw a different version of myself that from that moment at 23 I was like, no, I'm going to own my beauty now. I'm going to stand in it. And then every year since then, it's just grown deeper and deeper. And I said to you before on your podcast, like my perception of confidence was a glass house before. So then that deep rooted work again of like connecting with my inner child and listening to what she needed, and she just needed me to love her because I was running from her. My whole life I was like trying to prove something and be like, look what I've done here, or look what I've achieved here. And then she's like, yeah, but you're not sitting with me, you're not listening to what I
Mhm.
have to say. And that was really that integration of that everything, like we were saying, like we are all the parts of ourselves, the parts of us that were hurt, that were betrayed, that were neglected. We're all of those parts. And when we do sit with ourselves in that space, whether it be for 10 minutes a day just in meditation or whatever it is, and your inner child might not want to come up all the time as well, by the way. It's not something that you have to do every single moment, but sitting with yourself and accepting all of you and all those hard parts is where that beauty develops, that deep rooted beauty. Because I think that until you really feel all of that, like you were saying, until you feel it for yourself, can you then receive it from someone else. So if you are internally telling yourself, oh, I'm ugly, I can't have that, people like me don't have things like that, then you're programming yourself to then project that outwardly. So then everyone else around you is not seeing you like that. Whereas if you can say, you know what, I feel good today, I feel beautiful today, I guarantee you 100% someone will say to you, you look so beautiful. What have you done to your hair? Do you know what I mean? That will be the thing. So it is, I always say the universe is a mirror. Like everything comes back
Yeah.
to you, but it starts with you, right? And I think that's such an important part. And I think on that as well, obviously one of my key questions is, like, when was the moment that you feel like you really gave yourself that permission to shine, to be all of you, or to be the woman that you are now?
Hmm. Oh, do you know what? Like, I knew you were going to ask me this question, but at the same time, it's still a really difficult question to answer because if I'm honest, for me, I still think it's quite blurred. Like if I reflect and I look back, hmm. Well, okay. Can I give you a couple? Is that
Yeah, of
okay?
course, of course.
Okay. Like, okay, my first one when people say like, so basically, when I was younger, when I was in high school, I was like year seven. And I used to get bullied by, which is a really ridiculous thing, by what I consider to be my best friend. So you believe this person is your best friend, but actually what they do is you go through primary school with them. They're like pinching you, they're calling you names, they put you down, but you believe that they're your best friend because you're constantly trying to make her want you, make her love
Mm-hmm.
you. So you think, this is my best friend. This is who I want my best friend to be. And anyway, I remember there was this one day where this had been years, like so from reception to year six, it's been 6 years, and then year six to year seven, and we went into the same high school together. And I remember one day, and I was just really like you wouldn't believe it, Sherisse. I was this really timid, really shy, really quiet child. And I remember one day we were in art class. And by the way, teachers, if you're a teacher out there, never get a child to do this ever. It can only end in disaster, right? We were asked to draw portraits of one another, right?
Mm,
So I had to draw a portrait of her and she had to draw a portrait of me. By the way, ridiculous idea of a teacher. So
mm.
I obviously drew her in a normal way. She drew me, I'll never forget it. She drew me with like spots, buck teeth, frizzy hair. Like it was the most ridiculous, and you got to laugh about it. But at the time, it was traumatic. The most ridiculous image you've ever seen in your entire life, right? And again, she's supposed to be my best friend. And I remember, I don't know how it happened, Sharice, and it's never happened again to this day. I was 13 years old. Have you ever had a moment where, when you see colours, I genuinely saw the colour red? Like
Mm.
everything was red. I can't even like describe it to you. Like I've never experienced it again, and I'm 33 now. Like never had it again. It was red. I remember I didn't say a word. I remember standing up. I remember going out into, I think, the playground. And I think I remember like her following me and then these group of people following me because I must have looked like deranged. I must have. So then I had these group of people and things. Now, I don't condemn what happened next. I'm not saying I condemn it. All I'm saying is this was a changing moment for me in my life, which I had, which was I literally turned around and I punched her in the nose and I broke her nose.
That
No, I'm
shouldn't
not
laugh.
condemning. I'm not
No,
condemning this behavior. I'm just
but
telling you,
she had it
by the way,
coming.
I've never, ever, ever hit a girl again in life. No, sorry, I didn't tell you the punchline. No, that wasn't what it was. The reason I hit her was not because she drew that of me. That wasn't the reason. It's because she walked after me. She was like, oh, like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And I did at that time. And then she said to me, oh, it's no wonder that your dad cheated on your mum. And then I punched around, I
Yeah,
turned around
yeah.
and I punched her in the nose.
Yeah, yeah, she
So
deserved that, absolutely. And I
she
think
deserved that.
you know what as well, what I'll say is obviously I work with girls in schools and things like that. And I
I
don't
don't condemn
condemn,
that.
yeah,
I don't
I
condemn
don't
that.
condemn physical harm,
No.
absolutely not. But what I do believe is that there needs to be repercussions for actions. And I think that for that girl to like, and this is a boundary thing, right? Where you didn't have any boundaries, she felt like she could mistreat you over and over again, right? So then you built up this resentment so heavily that you just exploded. And then that's
Mm,
the reaction.
It's actually more than that. I feel like I can take it quite a lot, but if you insult my mum, who I protect with my life,
Yeah,
then
yeah,
there's
yeah,
issues. So it
absolutely.
was because you can come at me all you want, but if you touch my mum, as many listeners will think, that's where the repercussions come.
Yeah, yeah.
So from the reason I mention that is I think it's an important part of my life. So I'm not condemning violence, I'm not condemning anything. But what I am condemning was from that moment on, at 13, I changed. Like I
Yeah,
genuinely changed. So she never bothered me again. We literally were civil. She barely came near me, literally. All the people then started to see me differently, no longer this timid, shy girl. They started to see
yeah,
me as this
good.
girl that would, you know,
Hold our
has
own.
emotion and hold her own. And actually I began to hold myself differently. And I began to find musical theatre through that and began to express myself and then go on to do other things. So I think that that was the first moment, if you like, within my life that I saw this notion I began to change. And then the second one would be in my later life, where I decided that I no longer, because when COVID happened and I lost my job, basically, when they invited us to come back to the job had completely changed. All the benefits of travel had gone. We were now dealing with all the issues of repatriation and everything like that. And actually, when you unmasked the shininess of what the job was when you travel and you take that all away, you're left with actually quite a lot of not very nice situations within a workplace. And it's not a
Mm,
nice place to work. And I think the second time I gave myself permission to shine was when I said, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to leave my job and I'm going to go and I'm going to be my own boss and I'm going to make my own rules and I'm going to make my own life. Like it got to a
mm,
point where I was missing christenings, I was missing birthday parties, I was missing my life because I was working on weekends and I was not having a life. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want more for me. And so that was
absolutely.
my second permission to shine. And then my third permission to shine was when I then believed, when I got into the property industry, that I had to hide behind other people. I
Mm,
thought I'm not good enough. I don't know enough. I've got imposter syndrome. I have to hide behind Sophie, who's got more experience than me. I've got to hide behind Julia, who's got more experience than me. And therefore, they know more. Everyone knows more. The day I stepped away from all of that and I left my business partners behind and I stepped into my own light was literally the day I became who I am meant to be, which is the person you see
mm,
in front of you, which stands proud, which helps other people to stand proud. And I know my purpose of helping women to find their own voice because I think that these people like me and you, I feel almost have a responsibility where we were gifted our voice and others might still be finding theirs and it's our
absolutely.
responsibility to give them theirs. So again,
Yeah.
sorry, but three times that I have a moment.
No, absolutely. And you should celebrate every single one of them. And I think that even when you said you were gifted your voice, I don't think you were gifted it. I think that that moment where you stood up to that bully is when you found it. That's what
You
I think.
reckon?
Yeah. And I
Which is
think
why I
that,
mentioned it because
yeah,
again, I don't condone violence, but I changed that day. Like I literally
yeah.
changed.
You owned your power that day. That's what happened. And this is something that I teach, obviously, with women and girls, is that no means no, and when you feel like someone is abusing your trust, your love, your kindness, that is where you are absolutely entitled to say what you need to say in that moment. But I encourage people to say what they need to say always, like we shouldn't be
Mm,
waiting that long. But again, we're sort of taught by society that we keep ourselves quiet, we accept this bad behavior and all these things, but actually, even that moment when you went into your workplace and said, no, I'm going to work for myself now, like these are these moments where you are again owning your power and standing in it. For me, I think when I owned my voice was when I was watching like my mum and dad have these such volatile arguments and situations. And I just remember it's about 6 or 7 years old, I said to myself, I'll never let anyone treat me like that. And then
mm,
from that moment on, I then started to, hold my dad back from attacking my mum. And then I would be going in the street when I was getting racist slurs thrown at me. I would be saying, don't say that to me, or, I'd come at people back with what they gave me. And I don't believe that was a healthy way that happened, but it was necessary for me then to become this person so then I can and could transmute that pain and that hurt energy, and also that the seeing red that you said, that was something I
Mm.
had quite a lot because I had so much pent up anger in me that, I was constantly seeing red and I would just blow and I would take everyone down with me like a dragon, I'd be like, rah! And I'd always say that I have a black belt in arguing because I just have been so used to arguing my whole life. I can just shut it down. And while I still do have that black belt in arguing, it doesn't need to come out as much now, which is very lovely. But again, all the making of us. And I think, what's wonderful and what's lovely, and I hope the listeners are tuning into the fact that like we can all come from wherever we've come from in our lives, different backgrounds or whatever. But the story of success always requires one, some sort of sacrifice or hardship to get there, and two, that resilience building. Like real successful people do take the setbacks, do take the hard stuff. Like I'm sure even within your journey of developing your business itself and like the property and all of those things, I'm sure there's been layers of setback continuously
Oh
within that
God,
space.
constantly.
Exactly,
And do you
right?
know what the key word I always use within the property world? Rejection, right? Rejection. So when I go to mentor women wanting to get into property, I say to them, are you developed enough to be able to deal with rejection? Because
Mm,
my God, you will get no's, you will get people messing you around. There's so much good, but you do have to be really aware of this. And this whole idea of get rich quick in 90 days is absolute rubbish. It's long, it's hard work. You can gain the most beautiful rewards from it, but you got to deal with that. And I think that my musical theatre life beforehand, just a rejection in musical theatre. Instantly, you don't fit
yeah.
into the costume. You weigh too much on the scale. You don't have the right voice. You don't have the right legs. Your split isn't as low as the other girl next to you. Like constantly rejected, and so therefore, I feel like this armor just going on to me, so that when I got rejected by the agents and rejected by the landlords, I was like, yeah, that's cool. You're lost next. I was
Mm,
equipped for it. Whereas I feel like when I ask questions some of my mentees and they tell me that they're ready for it, and then they get their first rejection, they're like, they said no to me. I'm like, yeah, I told you that. I
yeah.
told you that was gonna happen. Like you gotta be ready, build that shield,
Mm.
build that armor. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you said such a key point there that I say to people all the time. It's that performer industry prepares you for something else. You have never been looked in the eye and told, no, you are too big, or no, you are the wrong height. And actually, people actually didn't tell me I was the wrong skin color, but I knew they meant that. Do you know what I mean? And it's like that level of resilience. And I think, in your life, when you've been through hard stuff, and then you go through hard stuff again with actually being told no to your face, you are fully prepared to take on. And I say that because there's two ways that could go. You could either take that on board, absorb it, and then feel like that's your new case study and that you're never good enough. Or you can use it as ammunition, which I believe we both have, to say, no, this is going to be the fire. Again, that proving energy, but it serves its purpose when it needs to, has then become that fuel injector to kind of push us forward to be like, no, I can take it.
Mm.
I can deal with someone saying to me, I don't like you. Like I can absolutely, it doesn't happen very often, got to be honest, but I mean I can take it, when it comes up. And I think that especially in property, I almost feel like it's a bit like, when you go to get a car and the dealerships start a bit dodgy. I can imagine that you know the type. I can see you sussing them out and you're like, hey, don't come at me with that. I know all this stuff. And this is why it's so important to be, I don't want to say educated, but it is the word educated, because I think in the field that you want to be in, it's good to know all the little details, isn't it? From especially in a property perspective, it's like being savvy, isn't it? Like, and that's the thing
Yeah.
that I teach the girls in the schools is like how to be life savvy so that you don't get messed around. So you do have strong boundaries. So you do respect yourself and in turn know what you want to achieve from your life. I would say that almost that's kind of what you're giving your mentees, but in a property perspective to say, no, this is what you've got to look out for. These are the things, these are the key details. And I think it's so much more than just this is how we buy a house. It's like all the
Do
little
you know,
details.
I say this to people. I'm like, if you want to just learn strategy and you just want to learn how to do it, I'm like, I'm not your person. I can teach you it, but quite frankly, it's boring for me. What I want to know is, who are you? Like, what
Mm,
makes you tick? What drives you? Why are you doing this? And they'll say, I want
yeah.
money. I'm like, money for what? It's not about money. You know, I want more money in life. Okay, for what? What are you going to use the money for? I want to take my
Mm,
kids to Disney World. Right. That's who you are. Why do you want
yeah,
to take your kids to Disney World? Because I couldn't afford to when I was a child. Great. Why
yeah,
couldn't you afford to when you were a child? Because my mum went through this. Okay, now we're having a conversation. You know, let's
yeah.
go deep. Let me get to know you. And so that's what I do as a mentor. I want to know who you are, and I want to help you grow. And I always say to people, I always record every session that I do with them. And I'm like, watch session 1 and then watch session 12, and you won't recognize yourself. You'll be a different
Mm,
person. You'll speak differently. You'll think differently. A classic example in my world, of course, is taking someone who genuinely believes that they can't raise any investor finance. No one's going to give them any money. They don't have enough experience. They don't have enough to say, to raising, like the last one I did, she raised £100,000 for a property that she wanted to take on. And she's like, I have no idea how I did that. I'm like, I know exactly how you did that, because
mm,
you changed the way you saw yourself, which then enabled a person to see you differently. It's a
yeah,
mirror. And
absolutely.
that's the bit that I love. I love
Mm,
really, really helping people to see themselves and the greatness within them. And
yeah.
yeah, I love that. And what I would say is this is don't it's important for listeners to realize they don't need to be perfect.
Mm,
I actually had a psychologist on my Girls and Property podcast because I believed, and she completely broke me down in a wonderful way. I believed that I always had to be perfect. In this idea
mm,
of perfectionism, I couldn't start something, I couldn't launch a product because it wasn't perfect. I sold 60 tickets to an event instead of 80 tickets, therefore I failed. And I always have these thoughts. I'm not saying that I don't have these thoughts. They are ingrained within us as human beings. But what they do is they teach you that done is better than perfect, you know,
absolutely.
and
No.
just do the journey, make your mistakes, because mistakes are going to come your way each time. Get your battle wounds from people that you think you can trust, and then you realize that you can't. Like, these days will come, they will come,
Mm,
embrace them, and it is just part of the rest of your life. So don't feel that you ever fail because that happens to you, and because something perfectly didn't happen. That will happen, and if anything, the imperfections are your perfect story, and I think that's important to say as well.
yeah, I loved all of that. Thank you for sharing that. And I think what's really beautiful to hear in your mentoring journey is the same kind of process that I do as well, you know, in terms of like how the mentors, the mentees see themselves, you know, like that first one to the last one, like that's such a transformation. And you said something so key there, and it's they change the way they view themselves. And that
Yeah.
is literally the nail on the head, isn't it? Because it's all about the identity in our belief system. Like it's always that. You know, for me, I am focused on kind of like understanding what's happened to us, accepting it, releasing it so we can rebuild that space. And I guess in a way you're doing that to an extent in your own way. And I think it's just wonderful, isn't it, that we get to do this and show people what they are capable of. And I think that, you
Mm,
know, we can see the light in them that they can't quite see in themselves yet. And it's almost like, you know, like I use these sort of terminologies of like ignition, ignite, and because I do believe that, you know, that our light shines, it ignites them, and then their fire then begins to burn and take off so they can shine. And I think that's just such a wonderful space to be in. And exactly what you said about perfectionism, I feel like so many people want to look like they have it all together or that it's
mm,
all there. And something that I feel like I'm trying to show more of is that you're already all of it. You know, it doesn't
mm,
need to look shiny on the outside. It can be all of it, you know, and that's why I do try to make sure that my content is a mixture of, you know, really polished, but also me coming on with no makeup and be like, hey guys, you know, like it's that's the reality of being human. And I think, especially
mm,
in spaces that we are in where we are our business, we are our product, it's like, okay, like I have and will always continue to integrate every single part of me and show up in all of that. Like when things have been hard, I've been very honest with my podcast, especially, and been like, yo, it's been a hard old time, you know? And I think that that's what we want to hear and see, isn't it? As
yeah.
people, you know, the reality of what it is. And I feel like you've definitely shown that today with your story, is like, you know, how you've been able to push through these things. And obviously there's so many other layers to you as well, but it's been really lovely to kind of get a deeper look into who Athena really is, which has been so lovely. So thank you so much.
Sherisse, can
Yes.
I just add one other point? Is that okay?
Yeah, of
Because
course.
I think, sorry, but I just think it's important to also say. So I'll tell you a question that somebody asked me the other day, which was a really interesting one that sits with me still. And I almost think to myself, like, we go through layers like an onion, don't we? So
Mm,
we go through the layers of trying to find ourselves, and we go through this notion of who are we, and then we try and find it. But someone said to me the other day, actually, they're like, Tina, with you and your personality, because I constantly go and go. I don't really stop. I just love what I do. They're like, when will enough be enough?
mm,
Like, when will your hole be filled? That sounds really
yeah,
weird. But you know what I mean? Like, when
I
will your
know what you
void,
mean.
when will your void be filled with enough? And that's a question that I still don't quite know the answer to. And I think that
Mm,
that's quite interesting of when you can almost sit back and go, I did it. Like,
mm,
now is enough. Now I'm ready to finish. Because my type of personality is, as soon as I finish one event, I've already planned the next event. Once I finish
mm,
one launch, I'm already planning the next launch. I'm always trying to be better and better and better because I always feel that I can give more and more and more. So the question is,
mm.
when is it enough?
Oh,
And I
that's so
thought that was quite
interesting.
powerful for someone to ask me that question. I couldn't answer it.
I would flip that on you, you know? I would say
Mm,
that for me, I already feel enough. And that's why I do the work that I do, because I feel like I embody what I teach and stand for. And I know that more people need access to it.
mm,
And I wonder if there is a reframe there for you in that space. Because yes, obviously going one thing to the next, but I think as long as you are prioritizing rest moments and
mm.
you are always in alignment with your values and the reason why you do something, at any point you can take your foot off the gas and your business will continue to run, I
Yeah,
think.
true.
So I
True.
actually don't feel like that question is a bad thing, as in, like, I don't think that, I feel like you're probably looking at it from a masculine perspective, but we flip it into a feminine one. I feel like
Mm,
everything you do is because you want to help people and you want to bring that to them. So I feel
yeah,
like you've created a community and it's thriving. And I think the next part of that for you would be to hire in someone to do the jobs that you're doing. And that's when you get to step back and just enjoy and watch your garden flourish, you know? So I
yeah. Oh,
think
that would
that
be nice.
yeah. So I think that's the next step for you in your business for sure. I think that you're building and scaling in such a beautiful way that, you know, maybe getting someone else to help you and work alongside you for a year. And then eventually you can start to do less and less and less. And then maybe that's when it all thrives. But again, you're only 33. You don't have
I
to
know.
retire yet. Do you know what I
Oh,
mean? So
although just speaking about that, 23 still scares the living daylights out of me. It
please
really
don't, because
does.
I'm 33 too and I love being 33. So don't make me feel old.
Okay. I'm not going to say what I was going to say. Okay, I'm good.
No, it's enjoying the process, isn't it? But it's been so wonderful to talk to you, Athena, and have all of your insights. So please tell the listeners how they can find you, your community, all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to get in touch, I mean, I literally live on Instagram. It's the best place to find me, which is Athena Dobson _official. I will always try and get back to all the messages that I do receive. If I miss any of you, just give me a little nudge. And then, of course, if you are into property, then I am on Girls and Property on Instagram as well. To be honest with you, with my podcast with Girls and Property, although property is in the title, I get a lot of different speakers on the podcast. So, of course, I had the beautiful Sherisse come on. I had somebody come on, a psychologist, talk about perfectionism. I had Jessie Lote coming on to do breath work, systemizations, marketing. I get all sorts. So if you do actually want to learn a little bit about business and a little bit about different techniques, then do check out the podcast. It's coming up to its 100th episode, which is really exciting.
Exciting.
So there's lots of different content on there. And then also I do have my Girls and Property community group. Again, I actually do something at the beginning of every Tuesday in a community group called Girls in Prosperity, which is to do with understanding who you are as a person and if you want to become a business owner. So even if you're not necessarily in property but are interested in it, then I highly recommend that you do get involved in the community group. And of course, just find that via the bio links within the Instagram accounts, or email me at girlsinpropertypod@gmail.com and I'll respond to you.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I'm going to put our episode that we did together in the links show notes as well. So if anyone
Oh,
wants to
yes.
listen to that, then obviously you get access to the podcast and then,
Yay! It was
follow along
fab.
as well. Yes,
Yeah.
love that so much. So I always do at the end this soul to soul message. So based on the conversation or what you feel like you want to share that comes from your soul space right now, you have the floor.
Thank you. So I would love to first of all say that be kind to yourself. And what I would love for everybody to do today, once they listen to this podcast, and I want them to put pen to paper, is I want them to write 3 things that they're grateful for in their life today and 3 things that they love about themselves. And I want them to pin it up and I want them to really see it and to say them out loud and just to smile when they do, flick your hair and just be the badass women that you're meant to be. That would be my takeaway for you all.
Yes, I love that. I do like to give a little task as well. So what a lovely one, especially the beginning of 2025, which is so magical. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for joining us, Athena. And yeah, see you next week, listeners.
Thanks for having me.
If this episode resonated with you, please do like, follow, and share with someone that you know would benefit. If you're looking to dive in deeper to becoming your most unapologetic, most authentic, shining self, please do head to my website and join my newsletter, where you'll find out about all of my upcoming events and speaking opportunities and all of the things that I have going on. And also, if you would like to work with me, please do drop me a DM on any of my socials or through my website. Love and light.